Hello, my name is Ryan Parker, and I'll be talking about the trending issues with gun control in the United States of America. The history of gun rights in the U.S. can be traced back to when the Declaration of Independence was first formed. Back then, many men believed they had a right to bear arms after dealing with the corrupt and tyrannical British government that had once ruled their everyday lives. Because of this distrust of standing armies that originated during this time, many laws were passed back and forth throughout history to perfect what was once laid down. However, no one ever came to a unanimous consensus on the issue. Conflict between gun rights and gun control has been a cycle that has continued for many decades. Those who support gun rights view those who don't as people trying to trample their freedom as an American citizen. Those who support gun control view those who support gun rights as violent gun grabbers who will do anything to keep their guns. The view of firearms in history greatly differed from today, as we saw it as a way to protect ourselves from something that used to deprive us of so many fundamental rights as a human being. The real question lies on whether the ownership of guns does more to protect people or if it does more to danger them. Why does it matter? The debate between gun control and gun ownership has always been a trending issue, but it is more prevalent than it has ever been. The right to own a firearm has always been a large part of defining us as a nation. The trending increase in crime rate in the United States, along with many gun-related incidents and massacres that have occurred recently, has made many Americans want to take a side on this war on guns. This presentation will highlight the opposing beliefs about gun control, the strengths and weaknesses of each, and how we can use them to better our gun regulation system in the United States. What side are you on? Those who believe in gun rights support the Second Amendment and the right to bear firearms. Their main arguments are that personal self-defense is a right stated in the United States Constitution and many other state constitutions. Another argument is that gun crime has decreased as gun ownership has increased, supporting that increased gun ownership actually prevents gun violence. Another argument is that widespread gun laws do not actually deter violent crimes, as many criminals do not care what laws prohibit them from having a firearm or how they use it. On the other hand, those who advocate for gun control believe that either very strict regulations on firearms or the complete eradication of access to guns to the public. Their main arguments are that the prevalence of mass shootings in the United States are caused by legally obtained weapons. Out of the 70 that have occurred in the last 30 years, 3/4 of them were caused by legally obtained weapons. Many who advocate for gun control also believe that guns are a constant safety and health issue, especially aimed at young children. Recent legal doctrines that have been passed related to gun control are the Stand Your Ground Doctrine and the Castle Doctrine. The Stand Your Ground Doctrine stems from the original duty to retreat laws that many states once held. Duty to retreat laws state that a citizen is obligated to attempt to leave a harmful situation before attempting to use self-defense. The Stand Your Ground Doctrine essentially voids this by saying that you are allowed to act in self-defense if you believe that you are physically in danger. In states that still practice duty to retreat laws, the exception is the Castle Doctrine. Castle Doctrine states that if someone is to enter your home or premises without permission, you are allowed to use lethal force to defend yourself. In current issues, Tennessee Governor Bill Haslam amended the guns in parking lots laws that had been in Tennessee that allow for citizens to carry guns in the workplace. These only protected citizens from prosecution, not from termination of employment. The amendment passed by Bill Haslam ensures that no employer shall discharge or take any adverse employment action against an employee solely for transporting or storing a firearm or firearms ammunition in an employer parking area. Another current event in gun control is a gun law that has recently been passed in Kansas. GOP Governor Sam Brownback signed a bill that allows all Kansas residents to carry a concealed firearm without a permit. He claims that Kansas government doesn't need to hand a citizen a slip of paper in order to grant you the constitutional right to bear arms. This presents an interesting scenario to observe because we can see how this state will respond to such a law being passed and see if this is something that can be done in other states. The real question is, what's the issue and what caused it? The issue I'm focusing on is the separation of gun rights on the federal and state level and how this affected American culture. If you look at the Supreme Court case, District of Columbia v. Heller, the Supreme Court ruled against a district's law that prohibited citizens to only owning a firearm if it was kept unloaded and disassembled or had some type of trigger lock. This type of one-year license that could have been permitted by a police chief was claimed as a violation of the right to bear arms outlined by the Second Amendment. Then, 2 years later, in the McDonald v. City of Chicago Supreme Court case, the city was concerned about its safety because of a handgun ban that had been placed. After reviewing the Constitution and the Heller precedent, the court held that the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms is fully applicable to the state by virtue of this 14th Amendment. Both of these court cases highlight the federal government's ability to trample out any state law involving gun control. Not only does this create tension between the state, city, and federal governments, but it also creates tension between the citizens that live in them. What has developed due to these causes? Well, over time, the United States has created a cultural conflict surrounding gun control that has caused the nation to be divided over this long-hearted issue. People from different areas could be abiding by state laws at any time, could be struck down and changed by federal law. This has caused the nation's view on gun control to be greatly divided. As seen in the figure shown on the previous slide, there is a widespread difference in the effects of each state's gun control policies. Some states, like South or North Dakota, with over 50% gun ownership, have a lot less gun deaths than somewhere like Florida, who only has 30% of their citizens with gun ownership. This doesn't prove causation, but it does show a trend. How can one state with twice as many guns do half as much damage as the other? Is it because of the way it's regulated federally, or is there a difference in state legislation? The only way for the nation to truly come to a consensus on gun control is if the federal government requires the same guidelines in every state. Even though the right to bear arms is explicitly stated in the United States Constitution, the states have spent so much time altering, bending, and changing their state constitutions based on loopholes so they could create their own gun laws. And after all this reviewing and research and court cases, one thing is clear: the right to bear arms has become a vague and confusing topic no one has a tangible answer for. However, everyone knows that firearms are dangerous and pose a threat to citizens of the public. Because of this, they should be regulated more tightly. However, because of the validity of the Bill of Rights, the right to bear arms should remain a right to all qualified Americans. Based on my own research, I believe every person has his or her own right to a firearm, as it is stated in the Second Amendment. However, I do believe the federal government should have a consistent guideline for all state governments to follow when it comes to gun regulation inside of their borders. This is to ensure that court cases that call for extra interpretation of the right to bear arms, such as McDonald v. City of Chicago and District of Columbia v. Heller, are not dealt with on such a frequent basis. In order for my opinion to work, much more strict regulations must be taken in order to maintain the variety of people that may or may not want to obtain a firearm permit. Think of it more as trying to regulate a car, except put a gun in its place. These include requiring a training test or training course on proper gun use before purchase so that they know what they're getting into before they have their own firearm. Performing much more thorough background tests and checking mental and emotional health is one way to ensure that those with mental illnesses or previous criminals do not get their hands on a firearm, as most gun-related incidents are caused by one of these two types of people. Other regulations could include the requirement of insurance on guns to create an outlet of liability, or even the renewal of permits on a monthly or some sort of interval-like basis. All in all, gun control itself is not the issue. Gun control is most definitely a good thing as it ensures deadly weapons are handled in a way that guarantees the safety of the nation's citizens. However, today's modern approach to gun control creates this sort of cultural conflict between those who support it and those who don't. And it also creates a conflict between different states and the federal government. However, if the federal government enacted a new approach that created one consistent procedure for all states that had much stricter requirements of anyone trying to obtain a gun permit, then there would be an efficient and safe system for gun control in the United States that would satisfy supporters of gun rights and also supporters of gun control and provide a safe environment for everyone to live in.